You guys good? Morning. You guys good to go?
Yes.
Good morning and welcome to the Lancaster Criminal Justice Commission meeting on the 12th of December. We'll go ahead and get started. If I could ask Mr. Smith, would you lead us in the flag salute, please?
All rise, please. Ready? Begin.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, Brett.
Commissioner Brown?
Present.
Shillette?
Present.
Gapel? Pickens?
Present.
Smith?
Present.
Vice Chairman Fuller?
Present.
Chairman Vieira?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and get straight into presentations. Day Reporting Center project presentation will not be here this meeting. I believe it's going to be at our next meeting in January. So we'll move straight on to the traffic collision presentation with Sergeant Paul Frem and Deputy Mike Politano.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to the board here. I am privileged to be the traffic sergeant at Lancaster Sheriff Station. I supervise our traffic investigators and traffic deputies. I would like to thank the board for having us come and give a presentation. I believe the city has strongly endorsed and is a very cooperative partner in our efforts to make our traffic, our city traffic safe. There's an active program where we're constantly evaluating our efforts and ways to improve it. Mr. Dorico here has been a great asset to us in assisting us with that. We appreciate the efforts of all the city and city members and the city council. I'm privileged to introduce two people that work under me today, Investigator Richard Daly and Investigator Mike Politano. They are the best of the best, quite frankly. They are a key element for our unit's success. They're both highly trained. They represent years of training and expertise, and when it comes to traffic accident investigations, these are some of the best in Los Angeles County. They are frequently called upon by other stations for advice and input on investigations and have testified in countless trials, and I appreciate their efforts. I know Lieutenant Ralston's my supervisor. He's the direct supervisor for the traffic unit. I know that he appreciates the efforts of all of our traffic deputies, but particularly these two. I'm going to give you a brief overview today. I'm going to shut up and sit down and let them give you a brief overview of what we do. I'll have Investigator Daly speak for just for a second and talk about the overall thing, and then Mike Politano is going to take the show.
Well, I'm going to have to ad-lib because I wasn't prepared to be here until about 8 o'clock this morning. So Deputy Politano and I conduct extensive and exhaustive collision reconstruction investigations. We employ classical Newtonian physics, basically conservation of linear momentum, conservation of energy to determine impact speeds. We also utilize a laser surveying type equipment, which is called a total station. We can map out any scene, plot all the evidence, and compute or prepare a factual diagram which assists us in reconstructing these collisions. It's definitely a two-person job. Mike Politano, he's the go-to guy with the total station. I'm the math guy and crunch the numbers, so together we are a pretty good team. So Mike, go ahead and start your presentation.
Hello, Deputy Mike Politano. I've been a deputy for about 12 years. Assigned to Lancaster Station, traffic detail. Even though I've been investigating collisions since I was an explorer at this station, believe it or not, I was an explorer in 1994, and back then we had pagers, and they would call me out whenever they had a crash, and I would respond out there in my own vehicle and help them document the scene. So I've been doing this a long time with, taking lots of classes, and we'll start the presentation, and I'll go over some of the training that we get and some of the training that I have obtained. So we'll start off with California collision statistics. There was 416 roughly thousand traffic collisions, 2,700 roughly fatals. TCs reported every 1 minute and 16 seconds. These are California collision statistics from SWITRS, the statewide integrated traffic record system. So there's injuries every 2 minutes and 17 seconds. One person's killed every 3 hours and 12 minutes. So in 2010, there were no days without a traffic collision. In 2009, there was 3 days without a traffic fatality. The previous time that had ever happened was in September 12th of 2000. So the cost of these collisions is over $20 billion. In 2010, Lancaster ranked third most fatal traffic collisions in incorporated cities in Los Angeles County. Los Angeles City had 219, and Long Beach had 27. And then there was us at 10. To date, this year, with the most recent tragedy that happened last Friday, Lancaster's had 13 traffic fatalities in 2012. In 2011, we had 7. In 2010, there was 10. In 2009, 9. And I can remember back when, at least even when I first came to the station, and even before that, I know our traffic fatalities were up in the 20s. And so I think back in, when I was an explorer, even I remember, because they would call me, and I remember that it was happening a lot. And so it has gotten better. So the traffic detail that I'm a part of, we handle filing with the district attorney. Rick Daly is the traffic investigator that handles the filing of those cases. I assist him in the mechanical aspect of the collisions and some of the more, I guess you could say, technical EDR downloads and stuff like that we'll get into a little bit later. But he files misdemeanors and felonies, suspended license, somebody allowing a driver to drive their vehicle unlicensed, reckless driving, DUI, speed contests, hit and runs, vehicular manslaughter, and even murder. Our traffic unit is the only station-level unit that will handle a murder prosecution. All other murders would go to our homicide bureau. So we are the only station-level unit that handles that type of case. And of course, homicide bureau is based in Los Angeles. Right now, with the addition of the fatality on Friday, we have 3 murder cases currently in court this year. They take a considerable amount of time to prepare, and we'll go into some of the things that we do as a part of that preparation. First, I'd like to go into some of the training that we receive from the department. Most traffic guys working the street will eventually go to basic traffic collision. It's 40 hours post-approved course. And then if you're kind of hanging in there and you can deal with some of the math, then we'll send you to intermediate. And typically that's about where it stops with our department as far as the training that you can get, because our advanced, we used to have advanced and a lot of other training courses, but They have since moved a little bit away from that. They're trying to bring advanced traffic collision investigation back. I'm supposed to help out with trying to organize that, but it's a lengthy process. Then you got radar and laser speed enforcement training. It's 40 hours. DUI training with the Data Master breath machine, Alka sensor. Those things, that's 44 hours. And then, like I was saying, that's about it that our county offers. If you want any further training, like advanced, you have to go outside the county. Myself, I went to Riverside and took classes through Riverside College. So advanced traffic collision is 80 hours, it's 2 weeks. And then reconstruction is an additional 80 hours. And it's a lot of math. It's a lot of math. Motor vehicle inspections is kind of the field that I'm interested in, because I've always grown up with vehicles and taking vehicles apart and rebuilding and vehicles. And so the motor vehicle inspection course I took, and it's turned out to be pretty helpful. I also worked for an auto parts store before I was a deputy, so that helps me. I was certified there, so it helps me with testifying on vehicles in court. And then there's commercial. I'm also a trained commercial officer. I went up to Sacramento and took the CHP's commercial traffic course, and that was 80 hours. Then there's a drug recognition expert. We do have a couple of those guys at the station. Sometimes we call them in as a part of doing a drug recognition expert evaluation on somebody. Alcohol is a lot easier to recognize than drugs when it comes to a collision. And then there's much more training that we get. So as you can see, if you add up all the hours there, I mean, it's all that stuff on the bottom side of that at other institutions is something that I had to pay for out of my own pocket and actually go to on my own because I was interested in doing that. Here's an example. Go ahead.
I'd like to interject. Before we go on to the other slide presentation, the California District Attorneys Association has a group of special prosecutors. Their program is called the TSRP, Traffic Safety Resource Prosecutor Program. Each county in California has these district attorneys who specialize in vehicular homicide prosecutions. They establish protocols for all the different law enforcement agencies in California, which they establish a set of standards that they would like to see each agency develop and ascribe to. And we have already met that criteria, that threshold. What the District Attorney Association wants is to close the door on possible defenses for these people that are being prosecuted for vehicular homicides. They want in-depth reconstructions. They want in-depth vehicle inspections. They want EDR download, which is the so-called black box that we have in vehicles nowadays. They want drug recognition evaluations. And so they want a very tight package to close all defense loopholes that may arise during the trial of these individuals. And right now at Lancaster Station, we have already met all of those thresholds that the California District Attorney Association wants to see. There are not very many other agencies, police agencies in California that have met that criteria. So we're in very good standing with respect to those standards at this point.
This is an example of a collision here. Believe it or not, this wasn't a fatality. In fact, this wasn't even an injury collision. I put that on there because it is quite amazing that this guy was able to get out of the car and run from the scene. So Yeah, it's one of the better pictures I have of, this I think is a BMW. And so, I'm not trying to promote any particular automobile, but this car, a lot of it comes down to just the way it happens. And in this particular case, the only part of his car that was really, besides the back end, in the interior that was, intact was his seat. So he was very lucky. So as Rick said, I'll go into real quick an anatomy of a serious injury or fatal collision. The first thing we have to do is photograph the evidence. The on-scene work that we do is very extensive. It takes a long time. At this last fatal traffic collision, I was out there 10, 12 hours. So, marking all the evidence. Because, at that time, we don't really know what it's going to turn out to be. It turned out to be a murder, but, that's what we prepare for in every case. So it's got to be measured so that we can prepare scale diagrams and do the reconstruction. So there's a scale diagram that we do. Then the DUI evaluation, and as Rick said, the reconstruction, determine the speeds using physics, which I'm happy to say is mostly in his side of things. But the EDR, most of the newer vehicles have a black box, as they're so-called. The technology to do that, basically an image of that data, is limited to certain vehicles. And so as time progresses, there are more vehicles that we have the technology to do that with. But in every case, we try to do, every serious injury or fatality case, we do try to do that. Chances are, most of the vehicles you're driving, if they're after 2004 or 6, have this event data recorder in there. And it really sheds a lot of light on what the person was doing, what the driver was doing at the time of the collision. It gives us throttle speed, throttle position, accelerator position. It gives us, speeds, engine RPM, brake switch on or off. I've even seen temperature. I've seen a bunch of different data that we can get from this black box. Sometimes we get 5 seconds before the crash. Sometimes we get even more. For example, our radio cars give us 20 seconds. So we're knowing what a deputy's doing 20 seconds before the crash. It's quite a bit of information. Then the mechanical examinations, which is where that's my biggest part in the investigation, is I go out to the tow yard and I take apart the brakes, I take apart the throttle, I take apart, the steering, I look at all the steering suspension, and I try to see if there's anything that would have caused or contributed to the crash. Because, as you all know, Toyotas have had a claim of throttle sticking, and you can imagine that there's a lot of defenses out there for if you're in a crash and you have a Toyota, that defense is going to jump on that. So I go out there and get to the scene, get to the tow yard, and I take apart all that stuff, and I document and take photographs of the condition of the vehicle and eliminate the defense in that aspect. In most cases, I do a cell phone analysis as well. I take, if the driver's at the scene, I'll take the cell phone if they give consent. Otherwise, we'll write a search warrant and we'll get into the phone. A lot of our crashes are occurring with distracted drivers. Personally, I think it's a very underreported problem, because in most crashes, we're not getting that information. In most of your run-of-the-mill traffic collisions, we'll ask the person, were you using your phone, but we're not going to get a straight answer, and we're not going to, in that type of case, we're not going to spend the resources to write a search warrant and get that information. So I think it's an underreported problem. We have had a few cell phone crashes where there were fatalities, and we had some evidence, and we brought that forward. This is another collision that occurred on Avenue H, and I believe it was 30th Street West. It's just an example of a solo car into a pole. This is a animation that I did for one of the crashes. I typically don't do this on most of the crashes because it takes a lot of time to put an animation together. But the factual diagram is the way you see it here, with the vehicles at rest, the way I found them. So with our total station, I go out to the scene and I set up the total station in the middle of the intersection or wherever the best viewpoint is, and then I have two prism poles, and whoever my prism pole person is, send them out, and I direct them on where to put those poles, and basically I get all that information on a data collector, take it back to the station, put it on the station computer, and I draw a diagram from that. The equipment and the software to do this type of diagram was about $25,000, and it came through a grant. Most stations do not have this capability throughout the county. I believe there's probably only maybe 4 or 5 stations that have total stations that can do this type of diagramming and animations. So the diagrams we're doing on most collisions. However, the animations, it's kind of a specific thing. If the DA asks for it, then I can try and put something together. But the animation in this case takes probably about 16 to 24 hours. The drawing of the scene takes about 24 hours on the computer. But the total station has saved us a lot of time and effort at the scene with just using a wheel, and it's much more accurate. So we can get very accurate diagrams, and with this, the program also has a functionality of doing the reconstruction using the computer-aided diagramming. We still need a little bit further training on that. The total station equipment does require maintenance. It requires calibration, so that's an added expense to the station. Thankfully, the boosters have helped us out with that in the past, but it really helps. This total station really helps us and really gives us very accurate diagrams. This is an example of after a collision. Typically, I like to go to the scene, go to the tow yards after I've done a mechanical inspection, and I like to take additional photographs basically of the collision sequence. And what that does is it kind of sheds light on how the collision occurred. And, a lot of times there's secondary impacts, and we can match up damage and really explain how the collision occurred and what happened during the collision sequence. So this is an aerial view over top of one of our fatal collisions. And you can see that it took quite a hit. This is an award that we got from the Traffic Services Detail, which is the county's main traffic detail. There's about 5 guys down there. We received an award for all the work that we do in these fatal traffic collisions. Like I said, I don't know of any other station that has somebody who takes apart brakes and does that extensive of an investigation. So I'm convinced that we have the best traffic unit in the county, and I think Traffic Services agrees with us.
I might add, just to give him some props, LAPD called and requested Mike to come down to do a complete vehicle inspection on a fatal collision that involved one of their off-duty officers that happened in the East County area of LA. I think it was up towards Corona or
Something.
So he's got quite a reputation. He's the go-to guy with that expertise.
And this is pretty much the end. But I want to leave you all with a last note. Don't trust the green light. And the reason I say that is because, if you're facing if you're facing a red light and you see it, more than likely you're going to stop. But it's always the drivers who take the green light for granted, don't monitor the intersection and go through, and then you have somebody that doesn't stop at the red, and then the crash happens. So to all your family members, remind them to monitor the intersections, slow down at intersections. And our city has speeds that are really high in comparison to other cities. It's because we have a lot of wide open space. And, you know, the speed limits are set by the state, you know, based on the 85th percentile of the vehicles that are traveling there. So there's not much we can do with the speed limits. There's a little bit that can be maneuvered there, but not much. So our speed limits are high, and when you have high speed limits, you have serious injuries that occur. So that's it.
Thank you. Comments, questions from any of the commissioners?
I got a comment, just a sort of a general observation, but over time we've heard a number of presentations from the Sheriff's Department, and it seems to always be at the cutting edge and a lot of innovation, and really appreciate everything you're doing for the city of Lancaster. I think it really boils down to, though, the dedication of the individuals. You talk about all the time and effort that you put into your job, but also the resources, even out of your own pocket, that are required to do this. So that's very impressive, and very much appreciate that. It's great to hear from you. One of the other sort of recurring themes that we hear, too, is the need for resources that are outside of the department. And really, in the grand scheme of things, are not that much. You know, you talk about $25,000 for a state-of-the-art system to allow you to do your job even better, and the Antelope Valley Sheriff Boosters come up as a source of those funding. So I think we should recognize their support, and we have Vice Mayor Chris with us today, who's the chairman of that, and Commissioner Shillette, who's a member as well. And I know that there's a whole lot of other people that are involved, but really appreciate the work that they do, and then more so what you do with those resources, because we're not talking about a lot of money, and take something that, you know, small amount of money and really put it to work for public safety and to make our lives better is greatly appreciated.
Thank you. And I do want to also thank the boosters, because without them, you know, we really wouldn't be able to do the day-to-day things that we're able to do, you know, with the just maintaining some of the equipment that we have. They're an integral part, and our volunteers as well. We couldn't do it without them.
I, too, would like to echo Tim's sentiments about what you do in trying to make the streets of Lancaster safer. It's got to be frustrating to know that you go through all this, and in guys like this last incident, you know, and our criminal justice system doesn't seem to do their end of the job when you do all that preparation and present things and, you know, see these things happen. But it's a you know, a compliment to your dedication, and we sincerely appreciate it.
I know Mr. Franklin's not here. He's in Afghanistan, but I've dealt with Mr. Franklin on a personal level, as well as his assistant DA, Robert Sherwood, and both of those gentlemen are very aggressive. They strive for the maximum penalty, and so we have a very good partnership with them. And as Mike alluded to earlier at the beginning of his presentation, we do have 3 murder cases, second-degree Watson murder cases in trial right now, and I just filed second-degree murder on our defendant from the crash this past Thursday evening. So the DA partners with us very well, and they're very aggressive. So we have a good team there as well.
I have a question. I just read a report on this actually just the other day, so it was interesting that you guys came today. It's good to see somebody that's so involved and excited about their position. You can see the pride of your work, and that you actually like what you're doing. That's great. But the report that I read, though, was that the black box is actually the property of the car owner. Do you have to get a warrant for that?
Sure do.
Okay, so that is a true thing. Okay.
Yeah, typically we get consent from the registered owner, but in some cases we do have to get a search warrant. And California passed a law that says that that's what you shall do. because they saw this coming. I think most of the vehicle manufacturers have to comply by, I think, 2014, and so they have to comply. So in this particular case on Friday, our system doesn't support a black box in this particular car, but I'm going to contact Toyota and see if they'll help us out.
I would say, too, probably Mr. Paris could shed a little more light on this situation, but actually there's a lot of legal controversy right now with the black box. There have been some findings that say that the black box is not the property of the car owner. In fact, it rests with the manufacturer because the information that is contained in that box is far outside the comprehension of the vehicle owner to be of benefit to them. So that's a legal issue that's kind of dicey right now. I don't know if that's been resolved, but we're always on solid footing if we get a legal process in the form of a warrant, and so that's what we do. We try to leave no stones unturned, and we try to close every possible defense loophole when we're putting our case together against these defendants that we have to file on.
Great. The report also was talking, actually, nationwide, we're down traffic collisions since to the levels of 1946. So this was a report. Is that, but they said bicycles collisions with bicycles are way up. Is that, we're finding that same trend in Lancaster?
I think that has to do with the economy as well. I think less people are driving. That family vacation that you were going to take, the economy is pretty bad right now, and I think less people are driving. Plus, there's engineering in the vehicles that we drive. They're becoming more safer. So, traffic fatalities as a whole have gone down. I think there's three ways that happens: education, engineering, and enforcement. And they call that the 3 E's of traffic. And what that, a lot of times we don't have control over all of those. The city has control over engineering of the roads to make sure that they're manufactured in a way that's safe. But we have control over the education, and we have control over the enforcement side of it. And I think in this particular case that you're citing is probably the economy has done some of that.
I just thought with the number of cars we have now versus the number of cars that were probably back then, it just amazes me that we're back to those levels. So, but thank you again.
They're much safer cars. All the airbags that we have, and the cars are much safer than they used to be. I saw a video of a crash test that they did, and they compared an older, bigger car that you would think that you would feel safe in versus a newer, like Impala with airbags and crumple zones. And after it was all done, believe me, you wouldn't want to be in that older car if you saw what it had went through. And there was metal flying around everywhere, and the occupant compartment was really damaged compared to these newer cars. So
the 13 fatalities that we have here, does that include pedestrians, bicycles,
yes,
car to car?
Yes.
Do we know the number of actual versus, car versus?
I think we've had 2 pedestrian crashes. Okay. And the 3 murders that we have, 2 of them are Watson murders. They're DUI cases.
The 3 are Watson murders, and then the one from Thursday, we're waiting for toxicology. We'll know for about 4 weeks if there's any substance involved in that.
Thank you again.
Sure.
I just want to say thank you very much. I thought that was very, very informative, and I'm glad you took the time to bring this information to our attention. I don't know whether there's any, it seemed to me this would be a ripe area for legislative effort to make the contents of these event recorders through a implied consent available for accident investigation. That might be an avenue. I don't know if anybody's doing that, but thanks.
You're welcome.
Just one more question. You had mentioned the valuable support you're receiving from the city and Mr. DeRico specifically, but is there anything at this time you feel that City of Lancaster could do to help you more in the work that you do?
There's some training that I'd like to attend for the momentum type of analysis that we can do on the computer. I'd like to go to that. It would save us a lot of time and effort doing all the math by hand with these types of, within the CAD program that we have. I'd like to upgrade the program that we have. It costs about $2,000, but that would allow me to do the momentum right there on the computer, and it gives you the calculations instantaneously. That would kind of help be able to save all that time crunching numbers, although I think we'd probably crunch some numbers anyway, but that would help. And the maintenance of the equipment is also what I would like to see. It's hard to get the funds to make sure that the equipment is maintained and calibrated and that sort of thing. And like I said, with the help of the boosters, otherwise we wouldn't be able to do it. So there's some training I'd like to see, but that's where I would like to see that.
You don't have a slide rule? We can pick you one up at Walmart for
yeah, it's him.
$1.50.
He's my slide rule. Yeah.
Slide rule? Yeah. Well, thank you.
Well, Mike, he's pretty young on the department. What do you have, like 10 years? I'm going to be pulling the plug here in a couple, so he's going to be the man, and so he's going to be here for quite some time. So whatever support you can give him, it'll be a great benefit to the citizens of the city.
Mike, if you put those requests into the boosters, I'm sure we can accommodate you for the training and the different calibrations, and
Okay.
we can take care of that.
Thank you.
I have one other question about the whose responsibility is it for the jaywalkers in the city, and what are we going to do to fix it?
Well, I've mentioned to John White's the team leader, and to Sergeant Frem that I'd like to see us write a grant to do some pet enforcement. And I think through John White and through the state that we can probably get that facilitated, and that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see us grab some of these special teams that we have and use them to just hammer out an area and really do a lot of pet enforcement. That's what I would like to see.
Mike, can I address that?
Yes.
Yeah. Just briefly, that's an excellent question. We realize that this city has a lot of pedestrians, and pedestrians that are jaywalking or a hazard in the roadway are a significant collision factor, and unfortunately sometimes are a source of our fatalities. While we can engineer better cars and safer cars, and there's not a whole lot that's been re-engineered on the human body when it comes to taking a massive brunt force and being hit by a vehicle. So we've run several special operations where we've done saturation patrols. Unfortunately, it seems like for a short period of time, those have some effect, but the next day you're back there and you're seeing more and more jaywalkers in the same area where we just had the saturation patrols yesterday. Again, we are working on that as a traffic unit to try to impact that area. Some of it's education, some of it's strictly enforcement. We recognize that pedestrians that are jaywalking in the streets are a hazard to themselves and to the people who are traveling in cars. Somebody will brake for a pedestrian, somebody behind them does not, and then we end up having rear-end collisions and that kind of stuff. So we're actively working on that as best we can, and we'll continue to do some saturation enforcement in order to get the pedestrian public to recognize the hazards of crossing outside of the crosswalks, and to get the notion out there that the sheriffs are out there going to write you tickets. And that's usually, unfortunately, the best way to get the action that minimizes enforcement is just writing tickets. And that has an effect for a short period of time, and so we hope to continue that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chris, I would like to say that although this year is somewhat different.
Can you speak up into the mic?
Although this year is somewhat different, the trend this year has been more vehicle versus vehicle fatality. Last year and the year prior, our fatalities as far as vehicle PEDs is about 40 to 50% of our total fatalities. So the pedestrian issue is huge in the city.
We're getting a lot of complaints. I did talk with the mayor in regards to it, and it is a priority of the city council that we start addressing it. Thank you.
Mr. Chris, I'd like to add, we have been doing that for the last several weeks. Actually, the reserves have been out there along with a couple of the teams, like with our top team, have been actively out there. I know Scott O'Connor in his reserve status has been out there enforcing it. I believe even it was on our local news station. We had one gentleman that received 3 citations in the same day. Okay, so obviously he'll figure out that that probably wasn't very good when he goes to pay the fine on compounding fines for 3 citations. But again, it has something that we did recognize. It started way back when we had someone hit in the evening hours on 10th Street West several months ago. So it's something we're addressing, but you're right, it's a gigantic problem, especially here very near to the downtown area on Avenue I. It's significant.
I've noticed the bike paths that the markings have begun, and they look great in the city. But you mentioned the speed limits earlier. Do you anticipate any change in the speed limits with the number of bicyclists increasing, or is that something that's going to be anticipated? Or?
Well, I believe that, they have to do an engineering and traffic survey in order to set the speed, and it's based on, that's what those things you see in the road that you run over, it's a tally. And the speed limit has to be set according to the state standard of, 85th percentile. So, I mean, we can lower it based on collision evidence and stuff like that. I mean, the city can lower it, the engineer. But ultimately, that would rest with the city engineer to decide if they can lower the speed limit.
Real quick, Ms. Pickens, one of the direct purposes of doing those improvements is to actually slow traffic and increase safety. You'll see a number of these projects throughout the city where we're narrowing roads, removing lanes, adding bike lanes. It is for a specific traffic purpose of slowing traffic down. And as the officer mentioned, the problem with collisions is speed. Is that you don't have those injuries if people are driving slower. Yet we oftentimes see the same amount of traffic flow going through those intersections, so it doesn't impact or impede traffic flow. It just slows them down, which is it's a major safety factor.
That's encouraging.
Well, thank you very much. Very informative, very enlightening. Sergeant Friend, great job. You have an outstanding unit, competent unit, so thank you for your time today.
David? David,
Yes.
on behalf of the captain and Lieutenant Ralston, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you and express what we do on a daily basis. And we appreciate your support, the support of the city, the support of this board, and the support of the officials here. So thank you.
And before you leave, guys, just on behalf of the mayor, we see your work every day, and you do outstanding work. We've taken your depositions, and you're some of the finest in certainly the county, and we appreciate everything you do. So thank you very much.
Very good. Okay, we're going to move on to public business from the floor, agendized items. Citizens who would like to address the Criminal Justice Commission on any agendized item may do so when the item is being considered by the Commission. Please complete a speaker card and identify the agenda item you would like to discuss. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. And consent calendar, approval of the minutes. Comments, questions with regards to the minutes of October 10th, 2012? If not, could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. Call for the vote. Thank you. It passes unanimously. We'll move on to commission staff presentations, updates, reports, monthly crime stats. Mr. Jim Cobalt, please.
Thank you, Chairman Vieira. This measurement period runs from November 4th through December 1st, 2012. The range for Part 1 crimes had a peak in week 46, which was November 11th to the 17th. We had 94 during that week of measurement. Then the low week was week 48, which was November 25th to December 1st. For total arrests, we peaked out in week 47 with 234. we had 181 as a low, and that was in week 48, which was November 25th to December 1st. For report numbers issued, or unique report numbers issued by the station, the low week was week 45, November 4th through the 10th, and the peak week was November 25th through December 1st. As we look at the average and median Part 1s for the measurement period, we can see November we reported to you that we had a weekly average of 63 Part 1s with a weekly median of 64. During December, this reporting period, that jumped to a weekly average of 81.75 and a weekly median of 81. The most active reporting districts for Part 1 crimes during this measurement period were 1135 with 49 Part 1 crimes, 1126 with 41, 1137 with 35, 1127 with 32, and 1121 with 25. To show you how that lays out on the map, this is 1135, which runs basically from Avenue H down to Avenue J, roughly Challenger Way over to 30th Street West, or correction, 30th Street East. You can see the primary area down here in the lower left area of that particular reporting district, which runs basically along Avenue J, about 3 blocks north, or 4 blocks north of Avenue J. That area down in there. Everything else is pretty spread out and pretty dispersed. So we look at 1126. You can see the majority of the activity is around the commercial area of 10th Street West and Avenue K, and on the area east of the 14 freeway. With regard to 1137, which was our third most active reporting district, you can see the vast majority of the activity is up around, again, between 20th Street East and Challenger Way, just south of Avenue J. There's also a little bit of activity over here, although not to the level of the activity around Avenue J, down off of 30th Street East, just a little bit to the west of 30th Street East. Reporting District 1127, you can see the vast majority of the activity is over along the commercial area along Valley Central Way. And finally, at 1121, again, the vast majority of the activity is around the apartment complexes in the commercial area, 10th Street West and Avenue J, and the area that circles probably within a couple of block radius of there. We look at residence burglary activity through the measurement period. You can see that 1135 had the highest frequency of 6, and then 1121, 1123, and 1137 clustered together with 5, followed by 1133 and 1192 with 4. As we look at larcenies involving vehicles, we can see 1127 had 9, 1126, 35, and 37 clustered together with 7. Again, the biggest spikes in this particular reporting period were primarily in the larceny area, vehicle larcenies. As we've discussed in the past routinely, that if people would lock their vehicles, it would really bring down our Part 1 crime rate. We don't see a big spike in our violent crimes per se. Our big spike tends to be in the property crimes. As we look at our 52-week trends, again, as you look at these maps, our most current week is on the right, and then you look back 52 weeks to this time last year. Rape, as we look at the crimes that are trending up, rape shows a slight uptick, but then we've discussed that in the past. That's a really low frequency crime for us, and so consequently 1 or 2 events can make it appear as if we're spiking up. Robbery, you can see there the The blue line here is that's just below the number 6 on this line going across is our baseline. What we do is we calculate a weekly average of Part 1 crimes. Our weekly average or baseline for robbery is 5.95, and you can see the green line, which is our trend line, that's closing in on our baseline on robbery, so we're showing a slight uptick in robbery. Arson, we're showing a uptick in that as well. Again, arson is one of those crimes that's a very low frequency crime for us. We average 1.06 per week. So if you get 1 or 2 arsons, that puts you above your baseline already. Homicide is trending flat. We had a week about halfway through the year of the 52-week look back where we had a couple of homicides within a short time period of each other. Other than that, it's trending flat for us. And we get to larceny. We can see larceny also is basically trending flat. Now, what I said before, one of the things that we had that was an uptick type crime, larceny was trending down the last time we met, so as you take a look at that, you can see we've gone from going down to kind of flattening out just a little bit. You can see for the crimes trending down, assault is in a really nice place. The baseline for assault is 15.47, but our range right now is running from anywhere from about 4 to 8 per week. That's one of the things that I was saying when we take a look at our violent crimes. We can see where if we can just lock our cars in our homes, we would make a significant dent in our crime rate, because you can see these other crimes are trending in a good direction. Burglary also is showing a downward trend for the last 52 weeks. Our baseline for burglary is around 23.79 per week, and we're staying generally below the 20 per week threshold. Grand theft auto is also showing a decline. You can see our baseline for that is about 13.09. We are generally staying in a range somewhere of about 4 to about 10 per week, which is a good area for us to be in as well. This is the overall map that's included with this particular presentation for showing during this measurement period where the 327 Part 1 crimes kind of laid out for us. It also shows us the frequency breakdown by reporting district. Again, this is this particular presentation is available on the city's website. This is our spatial trend analysis, and what this does is it compares the last reporting period's Part 1 crimes to this reporting period's Part 1 crimes. The red areas show where crime is ticked up during this measurement period. The green area shows where it showed a decline. These are our repeat call reports, and we can see in this particular repeat call report, we had a couple of newcomers on the list. One is 44624 Sierra Highway. They had a problem with their intrusion alarm. And then we had a private residence on here also that I think had some issues around in and around the Halloween time period. And this is the map showing how they laid out across the city with regard to the repeat calls. And this is our forecast for the upcoming December. You can see 1135, 1137, 1121, and 1127, and 1126, all of which we discussed today, are also on there for next month. That's all I have.
Can I add a few things here just to discuss that we don't talk about? You know, monthly, Jim has a meeting. Well, he actually has a continuing dialogue with the task force teams in the station weekly, daily. But every month we have a ComStat meeting here we hold at City Hall, and we bring our representatives from our different specialized teams in to talk about trends and things as we see as issues that have occurred over the past month. And an interesting phenomenon has been taking place for several months now, where it's almost become a competitive issue, where we do a predictive model as it relates to certain areas for the next several weeks, and then the deputies love to beat it. Okay, so we set a number out there, and it becomes almost a goal to come in under that. And we've been pretty successful at that, and it's been interesting to appeal a competitive nature of policemen in general are usually that way anyway. So what we do is they make it their mission to prove Jim wrong. And it's an interesting way to put it, which makes Jim very happy, which you wouldn't think.
Exactly, because that puts the resources right where we want them.
Right.
So if my map is wrong, that's a good thing.
Right.
Because my map is running off of 12, 13 years worth of data. And so if I'm wrong, that's a very good thing.
But I would like to invite you, if you have the ability, to come. It's the first Wednesday of the month here at City Hall in the EOC. The meeting's at 9 o'clock. And if you just happen to have the ability to do it, it's held monthly. And come, look, Jim does a really good job of putting together the forecasting and really looking at issues as we identify them in there, and then an ongoing dialogue with the folks present at the meeting on how we can probably handle those situations. So I invite you to do that, please.
So with that competition, can we look forward to the city challenging the Sheriff's Department tug-of-war at the Antelope Valley Fair this year?
Why not? I was on that tug-of-war team for years in the World Olympics. I'm happy to do it. Now I'd be more of a coach, though, not an actual participant.
Just curious, Jim, last year, I think it was this time, we got this report about all the shoplifting and stuff at Walmart and Valley Central Way and everything. How is that pretty much under control? Haven't heard a lot about it.
Well, the nice thing that the Walmarts and Targets bring to our community is they bring sophisticated detection methods to the valley, so people who would prey frequently on even our smaller merchants in terms of shoplifting or stealing from them, frequently their detection methods allow us to at least catch them and identify them. And so what we're doing now, Lee recently moved some of the Neighborhood Watch and Business Watch activities underneath my control. And so what I'm doing now is I'm trying to look for those areas that have the highest problems and see if we can bring together some groups in those areas of merchants to see if we can have some kind of an impact. But as far as an increase in shoplifting, I'd say probably. I mean, I didn't break it down that way, so I can't answer that directly. But you're always going to have that as the Christmas season approaches, and then you'll see a decline. Probably in January, we'll probably see a little bit of a drop off of that.
I will say that we have conducted some operations, specifically like with Walmart, and some collaborative operational issues that have been done with Lieutenant Ralston's teams at the station. We did a significant one at the Walmart on the east side, where the deputies will work in an undercover capacity within the store. So then, for that period of time, it's kind of like the adage that if you put more policemen out there, you believe your stats are going to go down. Well, they will eventually, but initially you're going to recognize a lot more activity that's taking place. So statistically, you'll drive your numbers up.
One of the interesting things that my intern from San Bernardino State or California State University of San Bernardino, Jennifer, wave Jennifer, she and I ran some numbers yesterday, and it was kind of interesting. Although if you take the arrest from the West Side Walmart, there's a significant statistical correlation between the age of the suspect and the later in the day that it gets. We ran the same data or the same analysis on the arrests over at the Walmart from the east side, and there's no correlation whatsoever. It's much more random than it is on the west side. So the later you get in the day, the younger your shoplifters get to be. And it's not always right after school gets out. It's frequently after 1800 hours or 6 o'clock in the evening when that happens. So it's kind of just interesting information from the arrest data.
Very good, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to Lieutenant Ralston, Sheriff, the LA County Sheriff's Department.
Thank you. 2 months' worth of data for our graffiti incidents. October, we had a 48% decrease from 1,440 in October 2011 down to 747 this past October. And then now we're down in November to 49% with only 565 incidents this year compared to 1,108 last. And the core team continues to work on the vandal crews. This past month, they wiped out an entire crew of 4 teenagers that were responsible for over 400 acts in the city with an estimated damage of about $200,000. So they took out that entire group, and hopefully they won't resurface or be recruited elsewhere. Back in October, we did an undercover operation. Mr. Chris mentioned the one particular intersection where they receive a lot of complaints on the jaywalking, and during that operation, it was only 3 hours. We arrested 21 misdemeanor suspects and 5 felony suspects. In just a 3-hour operation, had to call it off because we had too much paperwork. And that same day, they assisted the parole team with compliance checks and arrested 17 parolees. That was in the morning, and the operation was in the afternoon. So it shows you the level that our teams are doing. And in November, as Mr. Dorico mentioned, we arrested 11 felony suspects and 4 misdemeanor suspects for petty theft, burglary, and robbery at that Eastside Walmart. One incident that our robbery suppression team was involved in was a joint investigation with our OSS detectives, the gang detectives at the station, on 3 male adults and 1 male juvenile, which ended a series of armed robberies. They were responsible for 5 street robberies. And that's all I have.
Comments, questions?
I have a question about the truancy sweeps. That was just this last couple of weeks. What are we doing with those kids now? If they're cited, where do they end up in court, or what do they do now? The traffic court's gone.
I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, and actually it was something I was going to do in my portion of it, but I might as well talk about it now. Lieutenant Ralston, his school staff, along with Jim and the folks from the high school district, especially Matt Anderson, the principal at AV High School, we're developing a new model as we deal with daytime loitering and truancy. Again, with what's happened with the juvenile traffic court going away and the potential for the secondary juvenile court to go away, we're looking at alternative methods to deal with the truancy issue as it relates in our community. Again, as you've probably heard numerous times in here, the daytime truancy has a direct correlation to our daytime burglary rate and our larceny rate as it occurs throughout our city. What we also are looking at is, in the past, the alternative has been for a citation to be issued. The citation would move forward to the juvenile traffic court, who in turn would issue out whatever punitive damages they did related to what the bail structure was. What we're looking at more is more of a restorative model where the school, we implement a structure into it where if the family or the truant participates in our community youth court, there's some alternatives to community service as well as ADA recovery for the school district, because that's really the missing link here. The districts are broken down now. It's based on classroom attendance. We had an issue already with the juvenile traffic court that he believed if the student was on campus, then they weren't truant. Well, the actuality is the district doesn't receive any funds for that student just to be on campus. They need to be in the classroom. Okay, along with that is some of the fine structure was quite high, that it wasn't being addressed, and there was no alternatives. So something that we're looking at based, obviously, as we're building this project, and I will be bringing it forward to the Commission in January's meeting as a presentation to get your consideration for moving forward with the city, working on a new structure within our own ordinance as it relates to the fine structure for the city with the daytime loitering and truancy issues. I'm also would like to bring it to the Antelope Valley Union High School District for their approval to operate this test case of it on Antelope Valley High School's campus for the first part of the year. It actually simplifies the approach for the Sheriff's Department. It puts some additional burden on the school staff, which we are working through that issue, and Principal Matt Anderson has been great about how we might implement that at the campus. I think it serves twofold. First, we want these kids to be in class, because it doesn't benefit our community for these kids on many levels beyond that for their own personal well-being and growth not to be in school. Secondly is we're going to need cooperation throughout the community. We're setting up a phone line where people will be able to call as they see these youngsters out during school time hours out congregating throughout the community. Thirdly, again, is the restitution recovery is what we're really looking at, making something that's more feasible for the parental involvement and parental responsibility aspect of it, and for the school for Saturday school-type programs for a restorative justice model. So it's kind of all-encompassing that. It's been a lot of work trying to put this together, and with a level of cooperation. I know probation is inundated now with these citations as they come through this process. The reality of being able to deal with those on an individual basis is going to be really difficult to do based on caseload and case management now. So this is an alternative that I think is beneficial in a lot of different ways if we're able to implement that as we're discussing it. So I'd like to have the opportunity to bring that forward with your permission to present to you for your consideration and then your input, and then we'll go from that direction.
Yeah, I'd like to request with the commission's consent that we go ahead and agendize that for the 9th, if we can do that.
Sure. Thank you. Did that answer it?
Thank you, Lee. I would also like to, if we could invite there is a new probation director out here, if we can invite him as well, because there are some alternatives within the probation department that we utilize with informal probation and chronic truancy. That doesn't necessarily put them a criminal record, but they can be on informal probation.
Which makes sense, too, for the chronic issue, because there is going to be some thresholds that we need to discuss that we build into this alternative model versus a more formalized situation.
Right.
And you think they'd be available on the 9th as well?
I can find out his availability.
You can go ahead and do that, and we'll go ahead and tentatively put that on the agenda as well. That'd be great.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
David, I have a question for Lieutenant Ralston. Lieutenant, what are you doing in the community to educate them because of Christmas time, what they should be doing in the shopping centers? How are we educating the community for that?
Well, we recently put out a public service announcement through the local media. We don't have any presentations with the city, but anytime that we're invited to partake in the neighborhood watch or town hall meetings, we put those types of things on depending on what's going on that time of year. But right now it's more of an advertising campaign.
Would you like to take that opportunity now to tell the people what they should be doing as far as locking their cars, how to lock them, and what to do?
Sure, I don't have the full announcement, but some of the things that people can do are number one, when you're out shopping, being aware of your surroundings, carrying your keys in your hand as you approach your vehicle, keeping your packages. There's purse snatchers, bag snatchers close to your body, locking your purchases in your trunk, because the trunk is not necessarily easily accessible as it is to break a window. Also, the old adage, out of sight, out of mind, is something that goes a long way. We do have people that will follow you home, follow you around town, watch and wait for you to come out with that big screen TV. So if you're buying a big screen TV, save that for the last so that you bring it out and you take it home. Also be aware if you're going to be followed home. You don't want to necessarily, have a confrontation at your home. Some of the other things that we put out on the public service announcement had to do with internet purchases. Sticking with known, reputable businesses instead of some of the pop-ups that you might receive. There's a lot of ways for phishing scams to steal your identity, credit cards, things like that.
Can you talk a little bit about the how to lock your car as far as opposed to electronic locking it manually, and why?
Actually, if there are some savvy thieves out there that have technology that can capture your code as it flies from your key fob to your vehicle, so either pressing the button inside the door lock or actually pushing down the knob doesn't send out a signal. So that is a good idea.
Thank you.
There are those types of folks out there, and we're also. The special teams are, whenever they have a free moment, they're in the shopping centers. So we're out there. The city has given us additional Christmas patrol, and we're utilizing other resources to get out there. So we're in force.
That was the thing I was going to add. We've been in that mode now since Thanksgiving, just prior to Thanksgiving, where we have the holiday patrols out there in the evening hours throughout the city and all the shopping centers. I think the other thing we've done is every year we update the holiday safety guide that is available on the city website, on the public safety portion of the website. It's pretty informative, and again, we'll use some of the things that Lieutenant Ralston has talked about here, we describe in there, and some other issues for their home. We have an issue when we tell people encourage to lock their doors and things, because we do get occasional burglaries where the Christmas presents are visible through the windows being open in the front of the house and those type of things.
Thank you.
If somebody does observe they're being followed on the way home, what are some of the best things they can do?
Well, one of the things that I used to tell people when they called me and I was on the other end of the line was, don't go home. Come to the sheriff's station. I'll direct cars to you right now, and if we catch you before you get here, but come to the sheriff's station. Park in the sheriff's station parking lot. Pull up to a deputy or a CHP that's on the side of the road. Hey, this guy's following me. A lot of times we don't catch people, but sometimes we do if the person's alert. And we did have some follow home robberies where people were actually tied up, bound and gagged in their own home, and their house cleaned out just because they drove a nice car. So, that's another consideration too.
Thank you.
I think the other thing too is that for people to be vigilant in the shopping centers themselves, if you see a number of folks that are just loitering in the parking lot, there's obviously no purpose for people just to loiter in the parking lot. That's something the deputies address throughout those things, but as well as the citizens, and just make the store owners aware, or store managers aware, that there's individuals that are either checking car doors or hanging around out in the parking lot, that they, for no purpose, no reasonable purpose.
Based on Jim's presentation, perhaps maybe there could be some type of ongoing education throughout the year, because it seems like the higher crime rates are those where education would be involved as far as locking doors, locking homes or whatnot. But just maybe some type of campaign or something throughout the city just to keep it before people. I've let people know myself, and they're like, oh, wow, really? So there's a lot of people in the community that just are very unaware.
Thank you very much. Now from the California Highway Patrol update.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Our total collision picture this year is down 6%. Ironically, however, our fatal collisions are up about 12% compared to last year. They're on par with the three-year average, but November we actually had an unusually high month with 5 fatal collisions. Unfortunately, we've seen a slight trend in motorcycle collision increase. And I was talking with our Altadena office, and they have 2 because we've seen them along the crest since County Roads opened up, Angeles, the highway up there earlier this year. We've got a few motorcycle fatal collisions up there, which we would not have had otherwise. Our DUI TCs, however, are still down 3% year to date from last year, and our DUI arrests continue to be on the increase. We're up 35% from last year. And then our campaign that ended the end of September, which was, was the Arrive Alive campaign on the 14 freeway. It was a 10-month sober driving coalition project, and that was very highly successful. Our target was not to exceed 60 injuries, and the baseline was 70. but our goal was 60, and we ended up with provisional stats, mind you, with 21 injuries from December beginning last year to the end of September this year. And the baseline were 4 fatal victims. Our goal was no more than 3. And again, I'm sorry, let me point out, these are DUI related, is what we're talking about. And we had 0, so where DUI was a causative factor. And again, the injuries were the same thing, DUI. And again, it was very highly successful, so I'm glad to report that. In this holiday period, we will have 1 DUI checkpoint. Of course, the location is not disclosed. It will be in a county area.
I got a question just out of curiosity. I had to go down to LAX last night, pick up my daughter, but you talk about motorcycle accidents, and traffic was just horrendous. But, I'm going maybe 10, 15 miles an hour, but I see these motorcycles coming through 6 to 8, 12 inches away going 40, 50. Some of the accidents, is that common?
Yes, and we don't see that so much out here, of course, because the traffic is lighter even when it doesn't start getting congested till you get down toward the north end of Newhall's area. And that's a violation, not splitting traffic violation, but of course you have unsafe speed for conditions can be a violation, and that's a judgment call by the officer if deputies on the highway too and sees that happening. But if you're not on a motorcycle, it can be difficult to catch them. But
a little crazy
you have the radio.
driving.
Yeah, you kind of cussed.
I think, yeah. All right, well, thank you. Just any other questions, comments with regards to this? No? Okay. Anything further, Lee, with Business Watch Subcommittee? Or?
Just a couple other things. Working with some issues that have been come to light from the Downtown Boulevard Association, we actually had a position that was duplicated on our contract with the Sheriff's Department, so we've actually made that item with some savings from those contract minutes. We've added a day shift deputy now down here, working down in our Boulevard area that's going to have a close association with our business group down here. We also have met with the Sheriff's Department Bureau, who's in charge of security at the library. There are a lot of people believe that the Sheriff's presence at the county facilities comes from our station, and it's not. It's from the Sheriff's Department that contract directly with the county for those facilities. So we met with their staff recently because of some complaints that we've received over the folks that are loitering in front of the libraries, people that are trying to use the facility, and how that's spilled over to some of the business. An interesting note, and just putting together some data for downtown, in the last 18 months, the Sheriff's Department has had over 1,250 contacts with individuals who calls for service or self-initiated activity in the downtown area. Very digital down here as much as they are around other parts of the city. So that was kind of an interesting thing to look at, how much contacts actually going on with the citizens out there, local agencies. I think the thing is, with the addition of the day shift car, it's going to be very successful on the PM shift with the two-person car that we got out there, as far as dealing with some of the issues we're having, so I have the same expectation. Something that you and I talked about recently, we have an issue, this is moving more to our public safety aspect of it, where we have some transitional issues from a Superior Court downtown that believes it's appropriate to transition youth through the realignment program from California Youth Authority directly back into our comprehensive school sites without a traditional alternative model that the district resides in. The court is trying to force that issue on our schools. I believe we're going to be discussing that probably more and have a contact with the judicial officer that's proposing that, how it should be up to the schools to determine what's the best suitable placement for that transitional student rather than the court making that determination. What has been happening is we've had, and everyone is aware of what California Youth Authority is. It's actually state prison for youth. What is it, juvenile justice? Juvenile justice, yes. And it's significantly, a higher threshold to go to California Youth Authority than would be our traditional probation camp model. As these youth are being released through their realignment, this court is determining that they should be placed back onto a comprehensive campus without a traditional transitional model. So that's something that we're going to be having further discussion about. Then something we've been working on very hard with the juvenile DA is our graffiti restitution model. We've had some challenges. We have no issues in the adult court whatsoever. Our judicial officers, public defender, and the defense lawyers all stipulate to the model, but we've been having some challenges in the juvenile court on the restitution recovery aspect of it. So currently now, Marlene is working very closely and with our head deputy VA here at the juvenile court to reestablish our cost model and the implementation of that. We've had a recent appellate decision that challenged, that was brought forward, and I'm just going to be quite frank about it. We didn't do the homework and the public defender's office did. So we're testing that issue right now. So we're going to get that back on track and get back to what we do. I really want to kind of emphasize for this next year, with all the things that we're doing with our volunteer graffiti workforce and things that we're implementing out there, the parental responsibility aspect. There's probably some further discussions we can have from the staff level to the commission and get some direction from the commission on how we'd like to address that parental responsibility aspect.
It's good to hear, and looking forward to continuing working on that as well. It's a huge impact. But other comments, questions from any commission?
Lee and I have talked about this before, but apparently your efforts to try and work with some of the businesses in town to collaborate and coordinate efforts to decrease the shoplifting have been obstructed at certain stores which have chosen a path of no prosecution. It seems to me fine if there are stores that want to welcome holiday stealers, but the problem with that, if I understand it correctly, is that when we have a group of stores which do not prosecute shoplifting, the shoplifters aren't savvy enough to know that that isn't all stores, so it increases the level of stealing at stores that are willing to cooperate with an effort to cut down on shoplifting. And you and I have talked before about whether there might be a way to identify the stores that, particularly in the Christmas season, the Christmas stealers would be able to know which stores they can go at and load up on for their Christmas shopping. Is that a step we can take where we could take out an advertisement identifying the stores that have a no prosecution policy?
That's probably a question for the vice mayor.
Actually, it's on my list to give you guys. I did talk with the mayor. The mayor wants a top 10 list from the Criminal Justice Commission of the business owners who fail to prosecute theft at their business locations. The city wants to promote a certainty of apprehension. Okay, and that is the mayor's priority. We want everybody to know it's a certainty of apprehension. So we want a program put together. The City Council would like the Criminal Justice to put a program together, and we are giving them a 90-day notice at this time that we will publish it at the end of 90 days, the top 10 best places to steal from. So, David, if you could put that together.
Lee, I'd be happy to work with you on that. We could do something for the next meeting and come up with a resolution for the council. Would that be a good idea?
That'd be great.
And I'm sorry we'll miss the Christmas season, but we'll do the best we can.
Okay. I'd be happy to do that, sir. I already have some places in mind.
We did talk about this 3 years ago when the Criminal Justice Commission was first established. So it's not anything new. I think the community has been warned. We've talked to individuals, but if we could put together a program where some of the criminal justice commissioners went out there and told the individuals that this is what we're going to do, and for them to start a program that would eliminate it. We want, again, the mayor's priority is certainty of apprehension.
Yeah, we'll formulate a committee, put that together, and work with Commissioner Dorico and bring something forward for consideration.
I have one question. Is this, they're calling the sheriff to report the theft, but then they don't prosecute post-reporting? Is that how we're finding out that they're not following through?
Well,
go ahead.
There's several issues. That's one of them. There's also one that they actually have a stand-down policy. that there will be no contact from their staff, okay, and then they report it afterwards. So they make no proactive effort whatsoever to deter people from the thefts in their places. And then again, not the follow-up for prosecution. And it's common knowledge in interviewing suspects, or when the burglary team goes and recovers significant property, and then you still have store items that still have tags from those same various venues that we're talking about still attached to them. And I mean, literally, and Dr. Vieira can tell you as well as when Commissioner Greer was here, in meeting, there is a certain level of frustration from some of the store managers of those large chain stores that they don't have the support of their corporate folks to initiate that activity.
So they're just relying on their own loss prevention for their...
Which they have none.
Okay. So those places to go do your early Christmas shoplifting.
Yes.
Okay.
While we're on it, the mayor would like you to look at a different program also, a notification card, and it's for the purpose to notify the owners of property that an incident has occurred at their property. If we could put two commissioners together, a couple people work with staff, and if a incident happens at whether it's a landlord's property, but a lot of the landlords are saying, we knew nothing about this. Okay? We want to notify them that they have a property that the city is now looking at.
Do that. Other comments? Yeah, go ahead.
One. As we've gone through our season of city events, I'm happy to report, once again, we've gone through another series of city events with almost zero issues. We had a couple lost kids through the season of it. We had a spillover from a youth fight that occurred at a nearby facility that that's about the high threshold of issues we had as it related to the city events, and that's inclusive of all of them. But I want to thank the sheriff's volunteers. Okay, at our city events, I think the minimum we ever had was maybe 15. At some of the parades, we had as many as 30. And the sheriff explorers, as well as the deputies who move their schedules around to accommodate us and give us that overtime savings. We had a very successful year for city events and presentations and very positive feedback from the public. So there's a lot of things we use those sheriff volunteers for. When we went out to the El Dorado neighborhood, just on the survey, we made contact with probably 1,200 residents in the area, and the volunteers helped us do that. It'd be impossible for us to do some of the things without that group of folks. That's a significant, I believe our station has more volunteers than any station in the county as it relates to that. Yeah, we have over 200 folks that volunteer for different services there. So I just wanted to throw a big thank you out to those people.
Absolutely. Makes a big difference. Okay, public business from the floor, non-agendized items. This portion of the agenda allows an individual the opportunity to address the Criminal Justice Commission on an item not on the agenda. State law prohibits the commission from taking action on items not on the agenda, and your matter will be referred to staff. Again, speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. Any speaker cards today, Brett?
No speaker cards.
Okay. Any closing comments from commissioners? No. I would just wish everybody a Merry Christmas. We won't be our meeting again until after the holidays, so again, have a safe holidays and take care. We stand adjourned.